Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, and let's start with the big one that we were all excited for. I'm, of course, talking about Nebraska traveling to Folsom Field to take on the 1-0 Colorado Buffaloes. So look, before we even get into the game, give me 30 seconds on a side tangent here. I don't think I have ever seen a one offseason turnaround, not from a win-loss perspective, not from a talent perspective, but from a fan interest and excitement perspective, like what we saw at Colorado on Saturday. I mean, it's one thing to win games, hire the right coach, do whatever. But Colorado is a school that literally couldn't give away tickets last year. And to see big noon kickoff there, to see fans lining up at 6, 7, 8 a.m. to be at the front and to be part of the celebration, to see the excitement when Ralphie ran out of the tunnel, it was unbelievable. It speaks to even the off-the-field excitement that Coach Prime created and has created. At the same time, off-the-field excitement is great, but on-the-field results are ultimately what matters. And this was an interesting game, right? It was an interesting game because after a week of hype and excitement, you took care of TCU last week, and then you become the talk of all things sports media. And so the big question was, how would Colorado respond? How would they handle the excitement, the belief that they can actually win? They were a 20.5-point underdog last week. Now they're a 3-point favorite. Well, turns out they actually handled it pretty well. Final score 36-14. Colorado wins. But I do think that we learned one very interesting thing about them. It is that on a day where they did not play well, and we're going to get into that momentarily, they were still able to win convincingly going away. By the way, if you didn't see the game, Nebraska, that second touchdown came late in the game when the game was essentially over. And so this was a much different game than TCU. Let's get into it. Let's break it down. But again, I do think we learned one very important thing about these Buffaloes. Speaking of the game, let's get into it because this one was just totally different than TCU from the beginning. TCU last week, we all watched it, and that was just your old-fashioned shootout at the OK Corral, right? Like it was just score after score after score, matching this, that, the other thing. I think we forget because Colorado won. There were 3 different times where they were down in that game and had to rally to come back and win, or rally to come back, get the lead, and ultimately win. This was not that on Saturday. If you watch the game, I actually give Matt Rule a lot of credit. I know people are kind of mad at him about the whole Jeff Sims situation, but he put together the game plan to beat Colorado. It is exactly what we talked about on Friday's Aaron Torres pod. Run the football, be effective, keep that offense off the field, and then when that offense is on the field, bring pressure to Deion Sanders, get him off rhythm, get his timing off, because we've said all offseason, that offensive line for Colorado is probably one of their weaknesses. And so to Nebraska's credit, that's what they did. And for about 2.5 quarters, Colorado would, I don't want to say they were shook, but they were certainly uncomfortable. It's 0-0 after the first quarter. It is 13-0 at halftime, mainly because Jeff Sims couldn't take care of the football, 3 turnovers in the first half. But where I want to give Colorado credit, it wasn't pretty. Early on, Nebraska was able to, kind of, again, get that offense out of rhythm. Where I think we need to give Colorado a little bit of credit, though, is that when they smelled a little blood in the water, they took full advantage. Third quarter, they come out. They know they don't want to put too much on Jeff Sims' plate because what if he makes a mistake and all of a sudden they hit turbo and they hit go. And from there, the offense looked much better. It was far from perfect. They put up, 23 second half points, 4 scoring drives, and they get that victory 36-14 again in a game where Nebraska really did keep them off kilter for a lot of it. And so really what we could talk about in this game, the biggest thing that I learned is exactly what I said to lead the segment. It is that on a day where things do not go right, where things are not perfect, where you're not sneaking up on anybody, where Deion Sanders does feel pressure. He was sacked 8 times in this game, where you can't establish the run early. What I was so impressed by was I never saw this team get down. I never saw this team get frustrated. And I saw this team stay poised until they smelled their opportunity, till, as I said, they smelled that blood in the water and they took advantage. And I know what a lot of people say, oh, it's Nebraska. Nebraska stinks. They turned the ball over too much. And I totally get that. I do. This was like, I'm not even going to grade Nebraska. Maybe we'll talk about them to end this segment. But at the same time, listen, you can only take advantage of mistakes if you force them. You can only take advantage of mistakes if the other team falls into them. And so for me, I'm not going to discredit Colorado because Nebraska couldn't get out of their own way. And again, at the same time, it's about weathering the storm. And I think it's also, in my opinion, about realizing where this Colorado program has come from. Like, I think it's easy now. They're 2-0. The back-to-back wins over power conference teams in the out of conference. I think it'd be easy to sit there and say, oh, yeah, I mean, well, Nebraska stinks. They turned the ball over a million times. You're right. They did. And Colorado certainly has some things to clean up. Next week, they play Colorado State, but then it's to Oregon on September 23rd. So Colorado clearly has a lot of things to clean up. Nobody's arguing that. But I also think we have to understand who this team is and where they came from. This was a team that went 1-11 last year, okay? And as we talked about in the preseason, it wasn't just that they were bad. They were abysmal pretty much across the board. I said it in the preseason. This team ranked in the bottom 5 nationally in scoring offense and scoring defense. Bottom 5 in scoring offense and scoring defense. So it's one thing like, you go back to say like the old school Texas Tech, Cliff Kingsbury teams that were terrible on defense, but at least they could score at least they could score points. Colorado couldn't do anything on either side of the ball. They couldn't run it. They couldn't pass it. They couldn't defend it. They couldn't do anything. And so to see this team in a game where they did not play well, where they were on their heels, where Nebraska put together the right game plan to stay poised, to stay calm, to pull away and get that 36-14 win, I am so impressed. And so when I look at the big picture of this Colorado team, I got to be blunt. It's a lot about what we talked about on Wednesday's Aaron Torres pod. I think the ceiling of this team in 2 weeks has completely changed, right? Like literally 2 weeks ago, we're talking about, is their over-under win total absurd at 3.5? Now they're 2-0. They got Colorado State next week. They are going to be 3-0 going into Oregon 2 weeks from now. I assume College Game Day will be there, or Big Noon, or maybe both. I don't even know. But I bring it up because this is now a team. They're going to start 3-0. And again, you start to look at the schedule. I'm not saying they're going 12-0. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you start to look at the schedule. They're beating Stanford. They're beating Arizona State. You look at Utah struggling on Saturday without Cam Rising. I don't think they're necessarily going to beat Utah because I think Utah is physical and tough. But I don't think if Cam Rising doesn't come back quickly, I don't think that is like an automatic, no doubt about it, whatever. Like, do I think that Utah is probably going to have success against them? I do. But by the end of the year, who's to say what Utah will look like, et cetera? Again, you go on down the list. UCLA. I like UCLA, but they're starting a true freshman at quarterback. It's not as though the Rose Bowl is going to be this brutal environment. And so for me, with Colorado, what this says to me is plain and simple. The ceiling of this team is so much different because of the fact that they are so much better early than I expected, right? Like I think we all thought they could get to that 4 wins, but a couple things. One, I don't think most of us thought, even me, I thought they were better than people thought. I didn't think they'd look this crisp offensively early, especially against TCU. I didn't think they'd be this poised in adversity, which they were. And I didn't think they would be this good 2-0 going into this 3rd week game against Colorado State. And so my last thought for Colorado, I think they're making a bowl game this year. And if they make a bowl game this year, I take that back. I'm almost certain they're going to make a bowl game this year. And if they make a bowl game, that is an incredible testament and an incredible turnaround to Deion Sanders, Coach Prime in year 1. My last thought from the Colorado perspective, you understand that this is probably the least talented team that Deion Sanders will ever have at Colorado. Now, I get it. You also have a first rounder in Shedeur Sanders. There's no guarantee that you're going to have a quarterback this good anytime in the near future. But at the same time, we talked about the recruiting on Friday, Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong, and we did a segment on YouTube. Number 1 quarterback in America is visiting Colorado in a couple weeks. And if you don't think that recruiting is going to be through the roof after kids watch the last couple games, you're out of your freaking mind. This is a team that was already good in the portal. Now, give it an offseason. You mean to tell me every kid that enters the portal, they're going to be begging to hear from Colorado in the same way that kids beg to hear from Alabama or USC or Ohio State or whoever. And so the portal is going to be popping. The quality of player is going to be popping. The quality of high school player is going to be popping. Again, I understand, by the way, that it's a long season, but this is not going to be a 2-10 team. This is going to be a team that in year one, when they were projected to win 3 to 4 games, is probably going to win 6 to 7 minimum. And so I look at this team, I look at this program, and I cannot be more impressed. So yeah, I don't know what else to say other than 2-0. It feels good. I am so impressed with this team. Oh, by the way, if you have not gotten your primetime tee from the Aaron Torres Media Store, link is in the show description. Make sure to get that as well. 2-0, the Colorado Buffaloes. I truly could not be more impressed.